Do you know that feeling when a new console is announced and you're genuinely impressed by the leap it has made? The trailers hype you up for the new graphics and you see gameplay elements that just wouldn't have been possible before. I haven't experienced that for the last 2 console generations. The last console generation that truly impressed me was still the Xbox 360, PS3 and Wii era. Since then, every new release has left me pretty cold. I probably sound a bit negative again, like an old guy saying everything was better in the past. But let me explain. Let's take racing games as an example. And maybe just pick a series that's been around for a very long time. This is Gran Turismo. This game was very revolutionary for its time. And I have to say, even today it still controls quite well for a PS1 game. But let's take a look at the leap to the next console generation. This is Gran Turismo 4 for the PS2. The difference is massive. Back then, to us, this looked photorealistic. I still remember being outside with friends talking about Need for Speed Underground, and we all agreed that from now on, it looked just like real life. The same of course goes for Gran Turismo. But then all of a sudden, the PS3 and Xbox 360 came along. There was Gran Turismo 5 and 6, and Forza Motorsport 2 through 4. Those were the absolute graphical powerhouses when it came to racing games. That was the absolute peak. Here, the cars looked just like in real life. And then the PS4 and Xbox One came out, and for the first time I thought, yeah, I can see an improvement, but it's definitely smaller than I expected. And I know a thing or two about small things, so I know what I'm talking about when I say the improvement was very minor, but hopefully you know what I mean. But just think about how it used to be. From NES to SNES, from SNES to N64 or PlayStation, and so on. It was always a really big leap. But in this case, for me personally, it just wasn't enough. I still bought my Xbox One back then. And honestly, I didn't regret it. I still had fun with the console, but I still found the Xbox 360 more impressive in its time. Back then, you went from games like Halo 1, and suddenly there was Gears of War, which, graphically, I thought was really brutal. It was just a great time. Yeah, I know, on PC you had graphical wonders like Crysis 1, but let's be honest, maybe 1% of players had the hardware needed to even come close to playing on the highest settings. What always impressed me about consoles was how much they could get out of the hardware they had available. You have to remember, GTA 5 was first released on the Xbox 360 and PS3, and the Xbox came out in November 2005. That's almost 20 years ago. So, there is a way to play GTA 5 on hardware that's 20 years old. I think that's crazy. You can nitpick all you want, and of course everything is a bit scaled down, but let's be realistic. Optimization work at its finest. If I had done a bit of optimization work on myself, I wouldn't have to be sitting here right now. But that's another topic. But there are still a few technical aspects from back then that puzzle me. Nowadays, there are lots of great buzzwords you can throw around, and that annoys me a bit. I still remember back then nobody gave a damn about what frame rate games ran at, or even the resolution wasn't that important. Back then, people just accepted that most games on the Xbox 360 and PS3 ran at 720p and were upscaled. And on top of that, 30 FPS. By the way, you all watch my videos in 25 frames per second. Just as a side note, yes, I can tell the difference between 30, 60 and 140 frames. I know there are people who say they can't tell the difference. Maybe that's for biological reasons. But if you have a PC monitor that can do 140 or more, set it to different frame rates and just move the mouse around on the desktop. Even just doing that, you can already notice a huge difference. But actually, I want to get at something else. All these frame rate and resolution discussions seem to have somewhat slowed down the more important developments, in my opinion. Developers are now at a point where it's almost embarrassing for them to say their game only runs at 60 frames. That's just unheard of. It has to have at least 120 frames, run in 4K, and have the most beautiful textures. On top of that, you need elaborate lighting and physics that will almost make your computer take off. Oh, and let's not forget, ideally you also want an open world that's fully populated with NPCs and AI. That's just unrealistic. When I think about the fact that I played Ocarina of Time at 20 FPS and Halo 3 kept me entertained for years at 30 FPS, I have to ask myself, how important is it really? I admit I also don't like going below 60 FPS. But if, in return, I finally get a real graphical marvel again, or just something where I can say, wow, that's a truly massive leap, then I'm happy to accept 30 FPS for a story-driven game as an exception. For multiplayer, that might be a bit too little. And I think both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom ran at 30 FPS, and that didn't bother me either. and apparently it didn't bother many critics either. But since I no longer have the time to really get into a multiplayer game anyway, that's almost irrelevant to me. I'd really like to see something again that truly blows me away. But maybe my expectations these days are just way too high. Multiplayer in general is actually a topic that really blew me away back in the Xbox 360 days. The original Xbox already had Xbox Live, but if I remember correctly, you needed a credit card to use it back then, and those just weren't as common in Germany as they were in the US, especially not over 20 years ago. So the real Xbox Live boom only came with the 360. Of course, the PS3 also had its own online service, but pretty much everyone I know who had both consoles said that Xbox Live was on a whole different level compared to PSN. I only saw it at friends' places, and honestly, I wasn't that into it myself. That's when the Xbox Live subscription was really worth it for me. Back then, Xbox Live was simply a whole new world. I had played a bit online on PC before, but nothing ever hooked me nearly as much as Xbox Live did. On PC, everything always seemed a bit more complicated to me. For example, there was no Discord back then, which would have made a lot of things much easier. Back then, if you wanted to chat, you usually used Skype or for gaming, TeamSpeak. But with TeamSpeak, dealing with the servers was always a hassle. With Xbox Live, everything was so simple. I see a friend online, invite him to my party chat. If more friends show up, they can just join in. If you want to play something together, just send a quick invite and you're good to go. Yeah, you could do that on Steam too, but I think the user interface made interacting with friends much more pleasant. At least that's the experience of people who actually had friends. Joking aside, in theory, everything was super cool. For me, it was like this back then. I basically just wanted to play Halo all the time, but when Call of Duty Modern Warfare came out, nobody wanted to play Halo anymore and they just left it behind. That means, looking back, I actually didn't use that many of those features at the time. Most of the time, I was still playing solo anyway. Still, I remember the fascination I felt back then very well. But then the Xbox One came out and I actually used it a lot too, but it was already a bit of a letdown. You expected a leap forward like before, and after such a long wait, it just felt like not much. I think for PlayStation players, the leap from the PS3 to the PS4 was more noticeable. The PS4's performance was pretty much the same as the Xbox One, but they had a completely new user interface, and I think that was really necessary. I've mentioned it in another video before, but I think the PS3's menu really wasn't well designed. So that was a very good improvement. Something like a new menu is already the very first experience you have with a new console, so you shouldn't underestimate how important a good interface is. After all, it's the first thing you see when you start up the console. I'm quite familiar with not so great interfaces. I was born with one. Performance in online gaming are one thing, but progress can also show itself in other ways. Nintendo has always had a knack for something special, which led to big successes like the Virtual Boy. Okay, sometimes not every revolutionary idea is a success. For me, the jump from the N64 to the Gamecube was huge back then. Of course, it was more or less just a performance upgrade. But let me tell you, seeing that Mario's overalls had a real denim texture in Super Smash Bros. Melee just blew me away at the time. But that wasn't enough for major success. The more important leap was from the GameCube to the Wii. Even though the Wii had almost the same hardware performance as the GameCube, Nintendo managed to conquer the world with its motion controls. During the PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii era, Nintendo was able to prevail. That was partly because the console was very beginner-friendly thanks to its controls, and also definitely because of the price. Back then, it was the cheapest of the three consoles. I was definitely super hyped at the time. I was really excited and honestly, I wasn't disappointed at all. Of course, it wasn't quite as amazing as you imagined, but for back then, it was already a lot of fun. I actually still play Wii Sports Resort from time to time. But with that, I'd say we've reached the end of our little excursion. I started thinking about this topic because I recently asked myself, why did I completely switch to PC when I used to be a console gamer? My newest console is still the first Switch. I couldn't really get into the PS5 or Xbox Series X. There were actually a few titles on the PS5 that interested me. There are some good ones, but with the Xbox Series X, you can play pretty much everything on PC anyway. So why buy the console if you already have a PC? But maybe it's just age, and you don't feel the same fascination anymore. But at some point, you feel like you've seen it all, and especially my generation experienced the transition from offline to online worlds. We've witnessed a lot of changes that were really significant in this area. But how do you guys feel about consoles these days? Did you get a PS5, Xbox, or Switch? And what I'd be even more interested to know, what do you look for most in a console? Do you want to see bigger leaps in graphics? Is resolution and FPS most important to you, or are you looking for new gameplay gimmicks, like with the Wii? Feel free to write it in the comments. Thank you to everyone who's looked this far. If you liked the video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. See you next time. Okidoki Atisho. We did it. Yeah, we did it.